The right is redefining birth control and abortion to work around the law. Plus, Elon and JD are pushing a ghoulish cash for kids program.
And threats to Medicaid could be catastrophic to reproductive care, and we unpack it all with Kat Duffy, a Medicaid policy expert from the National Health Law Program.
Plus, musician, comedian, and activist Shonali joins the pod to discuss art as a revolution, being detained at the border, and her incredible new album, One Machine at a Time.
All this coming up on today's episode of the Feminist Buzzkills podcast, the show that will never put you in a registry, but we would like you to subscribe to our Patreon.
Because it's voluntary.
Fully voluntary.
Hi, I'm Liz Winstead, joined by my co-host, Moji Alabodale.
Hello, everyone. It's an action-packed week, so let's kick it off with a steaming dump of this week's abortion news.
Indiana State Senator Gary Byrne has authored a K-12 sex ed bill that, among other creepy things, proposes to delete teaching about consent.
Byrne's rationale is, quote, I believe it may be different thoughts in different communities on this.
So heads up, Indiana, you may want to investigate if your community is one of the ones debating whether or not consent is a thing. Counterpoint, America has abandoned consent on a federal level, so maybe Indiana's just trying to catch up.
Dark, but fair. And over to a state most Americans can't identify on a map, Montana saw a big abortion win this week. Politicians voted against putting a personhood amendment on the ballot this fall, basically saying if it can't play an extra on Yellowstone, it's not a person.
Facts. So let's head over to Celebrate Montana and support their national parks. Wait, do we still have national parks?
You just had to kill the vibe, didn't you? Well, I was going to do it anyway with this one. So, papal assassin J.D. Vance was busy this week, hard pitching Dear Leader on a million different ways to incentivize American women to pump out as many kids as possible.
Proposals include a trophy, a $5,000 baby bonus, and massive government funding to fertility programs that let you know when your hot box is ready to start making the bro nuts.
No word yet as to how you'll receive your cash bonus and prizes or what percentage of these babies will need to be sired by Elon Musk. Happy Vaginal Dryness Awareness Week, everybody! By the way, it just became Vaginal Dryness Awareness Week after I read that story.
Oh, God. You know, what?
I'm dry, Liz.
Yeah, I feel that. Also, it's just so insipid and horrifying. Rich billionaire men have no idea the cost of giving birth or parenting.
I was going to say, they don't even parent. These men brag about like never changing diapers. But also, $5,000 for what? What's that going to pay for? That will do like a week or two of childcare.
That won't even cover the cost of the ice chips you get when you're giving birth.
That is absolutely correct. And it's just like gross on gross on gross. You know, last week, Mr. Trump, he pledged to be the fertilization president.
I mean, I remember when he was running for office, he said he was going to be the father of IVF. And that shit is just no. I don't need him to be the father of anything because so far he is like the father of the fall of civilization.
Also, these men are like the last men you'd be willing to have a baby with at any price. You know what I mean? Like, and who feeds a child with a medal? A medal? A medal.
Also, if you're in the business of trying to cut government waste, you know what's free? Shutting up.
You know, I would pay money for that, actually. I would pay money for them to shut up.
Yeah, I feel that's right. And just another quick bit of news this week. The father of Catholicism passed away.
More dryness.
More vaginal dryness. And I'm like, the hot takes, I'm sorry. I'm just like Nancy negative. I mean, I understand, you know, all these friends of mine who are like taken to the streets being abortion activists are like, oh, the Pope died. He was the best Pope. And I was like, maybe he came out and had clarity around what any human being would have clarity around, you know, what's happening in Gaza. Maybe he has clarity that you should be kind to LGBTQ people. He understands that a healthy environment helps everyone. But when it came to abortion, This Pope was literally like, women who have abortions are like the mafia. You're like a hitman. It's murder, 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 shaming women all the time.
He was abortionist murder till the very last minute JD Vance said goodbye to him for all of us.
I know. And so, like, forgive me if I'm not sobbing for, the most progressive Pope we'll ever have. It's like saying it's the best smelling turd in the commode. I don't care.
They all stink. And you made really good points that, like, truly terrible people don't listen to the good things he says. And not so terrible people are just living their lives and enjoying their Catholic faith outside of whatever he says.
It doesn't matter who they install next because you're right. Catholics aren't following the Pope the way they did, or else there would be a massive outcry about what's happening in Gaza. There would have been an environmental movement that soared to the rafters. Sorry, it just doesn't work. So I'm just not here for celebrating the Pope. So
you know what I am enjoying? I am enjoying all the hot takes that JD Vance did it. I actually am finding those really funny because that man sucks. And I feel like two sucky people being accused of something ridiculous always has a little bit of humor for me personally.
Yeah. So RIP the Pope, whatevs. Let's celebrate something and someone who's actually amazing. The one and only super volunteer, Maggie McPherson.
Yay!
Everybody at AAF knows Maggie. Maggie has been a friend of mine for 50 years. Maggie has been part of the AAF community for a really long time. She tour managed us when we were out on the road. She's a super volunteer. She comes to everything we do in Minnesota. She also is the producer of our fun Do Re Mi 2 events. She's just a great human, a great warrior. And it's very exciting for Maggie's birthday to fall during Vaginal Dryness Awareness Week. So Maggie, what I hope for you is that you have a dry rosé and a juicy plump vagina on your day of birth.
Happy birthday, Maggie. The best gift is what Liz offered you. That's fantastic.
Oh my God. We have to go. We have to go to our actual show. Like I could talk I just really want to scream about the Pope, but I'm not going to because there's actually news to get to.
Yeah, there is. The anti-abortion movement is trying a whole lot of trickery to skirt around access to abortion care, per usual. This week, Louisiana is trying to pass a word salad as a new law by creating a crime of coercion abortion, which they define so broadly that prosecutors can just define it however they want to when they're prosecuting people.
Yikes. This is so wild. So in 2018, they basically defined language, right?
Yep.
That talks about abortion coercion. What does it actually say?
Well, it actually came out of a real case, the 2018, because it was a person whose husband had in fact slipped them abortion pills without their knowledge and consent. But Louisiana spun this into creating a new law, and then they used this year to expand it. And it says now, anyone whose use or threatened use of force, control, or intimidation against a pregnant woman to compel her to undergo an abortion against her will is a crime. Don't get me wrong. Like, people should not be coerced into having abortions. It's just not that common a crime.
And it sounds good on its face. You always want to make sure. So coercion is written into their law, right? You can't coerce people. It's written in the law. And then they expanded this law back in last year.
Yeah.
To do something wild. What they did was they decided to redefine mifepristone as a controlled dangerous substance. Both pills, actually. They decided to redefine the abortion medication protocol, mifepristone and misoprostol, as controlled dangerous substances like heroin, Valium. I mean, it's like I was thinking about abortion pills as a gateway drug, and I'm like, wow, that is a sad life.
It's a gateway to bodily autonomy, and really that's it. I'm like, come on now. These things don't get you high. What they are keeping people from is making decisions about their own life and body.
That's exactly right. And so what they did was they added 18 different instances of ways that you cannot coerce a person. So, for example, you cannot coerce a person in, quote, a manner that may foreseeably lead to the individual seeking or obtaining an abortion.
What does that mean?
Exactly. And it could mean, hey, you know what? You can't coerce someone into having an abortion. But when it says that may foreseeably lead to the individual seeking an abortion, could that mean, hey, Moji, my pal, I have some information if you want to have a medication abortion or if you want to go into a clinic and have an abortion, I'm going to send you some pamphlets and look it over and see what you think. Am I coercing you? Is that foreseeably leading you to possibly obtaining an abortion?
I mean, another thing they say is you can't coerce someone with the threats of extortion or claims of indebtedness. That sounds reasonable.
Sure, until it's like, oh, wait, sure, I'm happy to pay for your abortion. I'll Venmo you.
Right.
So are you eventually indebted to me because I'm going to lend you some money for your abortion? And therefore, I, as the person lending you the money, could be putting you in a situation where you feel indebted to me. Or let's say I said, I'll throw some money into your Venmo and you can decide whether or not you want that abortion. Is my act of giving you the money ahead of time making you feel pressure? Are they going to try to pin that on me?
This is the vagueness. Let's do one more. What about if you can't coerce someone with the threat of interference with parental rights or responsibilities?
That one is wild. What if your partner doesn't want you to have an abortion, right? And so it's interfering with the parental rights of him if you drive someone to their abortion without telling them? Or are the parental rights to the fetus, right? Oh, having an abortion is a threat to the parental rights that father
Right.
who impregnated the person
May enjoy.
Yes.
Yes. And the vagueness, basically the fact that we can throw these out here and do good cop, bad cop on either one is the point and also the problem.
That's right. And there's 18 of them. We'll throw what they are in our show notes, but like so much of it, restraint of speech and communication with others. It's like, look, buddy, you've been harming my friend and she wants to go have an abortion because she wants nothing to do with you. Am I restraining your speech? Like, who did these 18 laws protect? And that's also part of the vagueness that feels really wild. And the thing about this is Louisiana is just this week, and it came up, and then Moji and I were blabbing like there's so many states that are trying to redefine things, and this trend is huge.
Yep. And that's basically kind of what we even started when we were talking about mifepristone being reclassified as a narcotic. Like, it's not. It is a life-saving drug for people who have miscarriage. It's a life-saving drug for somebody who doesn't want to be pregnant and can use it to end their pregnancy.
And this isn't new. We have been following this trend for a long time. Birth control has been sometimes by the anti-abortion movement only classified as an abortifacient. They will say that sometimes birth control is an abortion. They will say that IUDs are an abortion, that EC is classified as abortion.
Emergency contraception, Plan B.
Medical science says these are forms of birth control, but if you're religious and you believe life begins at conception, then IUDs are murder.
Yep. Or if you just are religious and you believe no one should have sex outside of procreation as the primary focus, then if you are stopping procreation in any way, that's birth control, that's murder. That's not how God thinks you should be having sex.
Well, and what's crazy about that is you cannot have an abortion before you are pregnant. This is a true fact. Please try to dispute it, right? And so what emergency contraception does is that it stops a fertilized egg from implanting into the uterus. You cannot have pregnancy without implantation. The IUD stops any kind of fertilized egg from implanting into the uterus. That's what they do. They prevent pregnancy. And so that they are just allowed to do this redefinition. I mean, we went to the Supreme Court. Hobby Lobby went to the Supreme Court. And during that case, and this was astounding, the anti-abortion lawyer 57 times made inaccurate statements about presenting IUDs and emergency contraception as abortifacients. And if there was not women on the Supreme Court to correct them every time, that many lies would have just stood in the record and in the case. It was maddening. And they won.
And I want to go back to the criminalization of it, because if you say that anytime a person could potentially have a fertilized egg and that potential fertilized egg has all the rights of anyone, then essentially any woman who ovulates at any time could potentially be pregnant and therefore criminalized for any action she does that stops the pregnancy.
That's exactly right. And they're also trying to skirt around the issues by reclassifying the word trafficking. So when you think of trafficking teens or trafficking vulnerable people, now they're saying that if you help somebody get an abortion across state lines, that's human trafficking of abortion.
That is trafficking friendship. That is trafficking helpful aunts. And usually, as is the way they start these, it starts with minors, right? You can't traffic a minor who needs an abortion without their parent on site. It invariably expands to just anyone.
And that's really scary. And there's like several states that have those trafficking laws. You've got Idaho and Tennessee already have it passed. And then Alabama, Mississippi, Oklahoma are trying to introduce similar trafficking legislation. Also, Texas. That's a big one. But here's the one that's the wildest to me. And it's literally redefining abortion writ large. So right wingers can have abortions. What are we saying? Oh, yes. The right wing has come up with this term that's called maternal fetal separation.
Not an abortion. It's
Not
just
an
when you
abortion.
separate a fetus from a living person. Not an abortion. All these maternal fetal separation things put the focus on intent, right? So it's not even about the actual physical thing that happens because we know that medically there is not a difference between a miscarriage and an abortion, right? You were pregnant and then you're not pregnant. But when you create this maternal fetal separation, it says, no, 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 you wanted to be pregnant. It's just so sad that you've lost that pregnancy or you've miscarried or there's some reason that this pregnancy is doomed. And instead of an abortion, it's a maternal fetal separation. And this also opens up, rather than using medication or having what we would normally call an abortion, it moves into like have a C-section for a doomed pregnancy. That is extra trauma. That is extra care. That is extra money when we already have medicine that cures what you need.
And back to Louisiana, they started leading the way on saying we have outlawed abortion. So if you have a pregnancy and you no longer want to be pregnant, you have to get a C-section instead of a simple abortion procedure for a non-viable fetus, for a fetus under 10, 6, 8 weeks. The whole thing is terrifying. So watch for these trends. We've been following them, but when you ever hear the words trafficking, when you hear coercion, when you hear them talking about abortifacients, those are things that you should really be thinking about them trying to redefine what's actually just a safe abortion. And it's really fucked up.
It's really distressing. And basically, they choose to focus all their energy on these mythical situations while excitingly cutting support for real people who have real problems. Liz, the fuckery is real.
It's true. And this week totally sucked because we watched the news and, between this wild offering participation medals to promote parenting or cutting the longest and most comprehensive research at the NIH on women's health and then slashing Title 10. And then you get to Medicaid, it's all a big lump. And I feel like it wasn't focused on enough. And Moji and I really wanted to talk about how many people are just affected by these horrible cuts while they're promoting all this shiny object bullshit. And so we thought, let's bring on an expert who can talk to us for a little bit about what these cuts mean and talk to us about the real world implications because it's just gross, the cavalier nature of all of it. And they seem to not understand or care how we're affected.
I mean, you circle back into this like pro-natalist, I love seeing it called bro-natalist thing to push people into having children, but you're slashing research on maternal mortality. You're slashing research on women's health outcomes in general. There's Medicaid's on the cutting block, and that's how a lot of people get pregnancy care. If you want to have babies, how do we do this without support?
That's exactly right. And you're cutting all of the care for low-income people around it as well. It was outrageous when Chuck Schumer said, yeah, sure, we're going to vote on this bill that contains an $800 billion cut in Medicaid, and other Democrats signed on to it. We went to Washington, D.C., and we went to his office, and we marched right in with Elizabeth Booker Houston, who told her story about what she went through. And Medicaid pregnancies, people who need reproductive care through Medicaid, I don't think people understand. It's your friends and your neighbors and just how many people rely on this care. And so we decided, you know what, let's bring on an expert on policy who can really walk us through who is the most affected and just how many people will be affected if these cuts go through.
So let's get to our guest. She's a policy analyst at the National Health Law Program, and she's here to discuss exactly what's at stake. Please welcome Kat Duffy. Kat, thank you for joining us. Hello.
Hi, Kat.
Thank you so much for having me.
So you've been doing the work on the Medicaid crisis as an analyst at the National Health Law Program. So you must be big mad about the latest proposed cuts to Medicaid. When you take a chainsaw and hack away $800 billion with a B from the Medicaid program, what does this big cut mean for access to repro care for low-income people?
Yeah, so the exact shape and scope of how the budget reconciliation process might take a literal axe to the Medicaid program is still very TBD. The congressional negotiations have been sort of just a constantly moving target, which is obviously by design. There's a couple different proposals that have been floated by congressional Republicans that would result, as you said, in hundreds of billions of dollars in cuts to Medicaid. And I'll just sort of briefly touch on two. The first one is instituting cuts to what is called FMAP. It's the Federal Medical Assistance Percentage. And it's the percentage of a state's overall Medicaid costs that the federal government reimburses. And what's currently on the table is cutting FMAP and reducing the amount of federal matching funds that states receive for Medicaid coverage to the tune of billions of dollars. The second one, which I think is more insidious, is work requirements for Medicaid enrollees. And they're insidious because they cut Medicaid, but by doing so via triggering coverage losses rather than appearing as direct funding cuts. But at the end of the day, no matter how they do it, cutting hundreds of billions of dollars from Medicaid will be devastating to the state of public health in the United States. It may force states to scale back eligibility for their Medicaid programs. Especially states that have expanded Medicaid might have to reverse course, which would harm the millions of people, including millions of people of reproductive age who live in those states who have gained access to coverage as a result. On the sexual and reproductive healthcare front, states might have to lower their income eligibility for pregnancy-related Medicaid or drop critical optional programs such as limited scope family planning coverage, which again would cause millions of people to lose coverage, which is sort of a constant refrain in discussions about these proposals. States might also be forced to cut coverage for particular services. And given the increasingly stigmatized and siloed nature of sexual and reproductive health care, it could be a huge target. For example, states could narrow the list of covered pregnancy-related services or drop their outpatient prescription drug benefit. And in a world where states have less federal funding, states could also be forced to walk back the state-funded programs that they have, which are these programs that are only funded by state dollars because of federal restrictions, but are aimed at Medicaid enrollees. And that includes ones like the programs that cover abortion coverage or extend coverage to undocumented immigrants. But the bottom line is that Medicaid cuts of this magnitude will harm millions of people across the country.
I want to get really specific because I feel like you said these broad things, but so if a person is pregnant and can't afford it, what happens? If you don't have Medicaid coverage?
Do you mean in the status quo in a world of cuts?
In a world of cuts.
I mean, I feel like in a lot of instances, people will be, so to speak, up a river without a paddle. Medicaid covers almost 50% of births in the status quo. And in a world where states have to change their eligibility rates or just cut back on services is going to disproportionately harm people of reproductive age because Medicaid is so crucial for access to sexual and reproductive healthcare services.
I just want to ask if you could just tell folks, I think we talk about Medicaid in such broad terms, and I think it to privileged audiences and to privileged people who listen, I don't think that they really understand the vast number of people who have Medicaid services. I mean, you just said 50% of births are under Medicaid coverage. That's astounding. That's an astounding number. Right. And so can you talk a little bit about when we look at our neighbors and our communities and our population in our country, who is Medicaid servicing? Because it's our neighbors.
It is. Medicaid is the largest public health insurance program in the United States. And so the makeup of like who is a Medicaid enrollee is as varied as the makeup of our country. It covers nearly 80 million people, which is 1 in 5 Americans. It also covers 4 in 10 kids, which I think a lot of people don't know about. And due to like structural discrimination and barriers to wealth, Medicaid also disproportionately covers Black, Indigenous, and other communities of color, as well as people with disabilities. Something I think a lot of people don't know actually is that as people age, a higher percentage of individuals are covered by Medicaid. It's the primary funder of long-term services and supports and like nursing home facilities in particular. So like unless your parents are independently wealthy, odds are Medicaid is how many people get care in their old age. And Medicaid enrollees live in every state, every territory, the District of Columbia. There's no like one Medicaid enrollee because Medicaid is such a fundamental part of the fabric of the American healthcare system.
That's terrifying. I have lots of friends whose births were covered by Medicaid. It's not uncommon.
Yeah.
It's just, I'm just struggling to look at a world where there's like, seriously, what do? You go to hospital and then what? You just go into medical debt? Like, what happens?
And also, Kat, we talk about these Medicaid cuts, and then we also watched another sexual health program, reproductive health program, Title X, being completely threatened, right? And so if clinics that receive Title X funding are also going to go away and folks don't have Medicaid dollars to help them with their births and their pregnancies, and federal Medicaid dollars don't help if abortion is an option because you can't, because the Hyde Amendment, it just all seems really dire. I don't even have a question. It just seems dire.
Yeah, I mean, you're not wrong, especially in the abortion context, in like an acute crisis since 2022. But let's be so real. Like the attacks on abortion access have been happening for decades and decades. And in my opinion, it's sort of hard to quantify the like public health catastrophe we'll be facing if Congress not only cuts like hundreds of billions of dollars from Medicaid and also cuts Title X. I think we'll see just like a huge disruption in the provider network because these health centers simply can't afford to stay open without these vital federal funding streams. And we're actually already starting to see clinics having to close at least temporarily as a result of like the current freeze on Title X funds. And it sort of goes without saying that these are health centers that were already running on razor thin margins, doing more because of the increased number of people that have to travel to access care if they live in a state that is hostile to sexual and reproductive health care. And they're doing more with less. And it's simply not sustainable in the status quo, let alone in a world where all of these like deeply important funding streams go away or are like massively reduced.
And when we talk about states that do take Medicaid, the clinics that are taking Medicaid are often not getting reimbursement rates that cover the cost of the procedure, and they're subsidizing the care. And that is not a sustainable model.
Yeah, I think Medicaid reimbursement rates are like an interesting example where abortion is not actually the exception to the rule because Medicaid reimbursement rates are low across the board. But it's also true that abortion reimbursement rates are much lower than the cost of actually providing care, particularly for abortions later in pregnancy. And I know that there is like incredible work that is being done across the country by state advocates to improve reimbursement rates and get it to a place that is more sustainable for providers to be able to provide care and be a Medicaid provider. But like that work will be sort of cut off at the knees in a world where we're dealing with these like huge federal funding cuts.
I wanted to step back a little bit. I know that you were talking about sort of the reductions in care that would happen. And I feel like a lot of times you hear these words, and I know that there's not any one Medicaid example, but just what would it look like for a person who is low income, who needs care, who is pregnant and shows up at a hospital And for whatever reason, does this mean you can't have a C-section? Does this mean that you can't have pain medication? What are the kind of care things that could be excluded for like a pregnant person?
I mean, it's hard to say exactly what states will like pick and choose in this world. And like, honestly, there's a very concerted strategy, I think, happening by Republicans to sort of pit services or coverage groups against each other, which is why I think it's been really incredible that people who are sort of uniting to save Medicaid are saving Medicaid as a whole, because you can't like pick, oh yeah, we'll have coverage for C-sections, but not actually for the anesthesia for that C-section, or we'll cover your contraception, but only, the pill, not IUDs. People deserve access to the full spectrum of care. And while I think that like, obviously the status quo healthcare landscape is deeply flawed, and in many ways where you live determines your ability to access care, particularly on sexual and reproductive healthcare services for Medicaid enrollees. Mostly I'm talking about abortion, as I usually do. So all that is to say, like, it's a little bit unclear, like, what that world would look like, but I almost don't even want to contemplate it because we're so focused on stopping these cuts as a whole.
So you've also done advocacy work in this. And again, we care and we feel like it's just out of our control. So how can advocates like us or any other people who wants to get involved in just pushing back against these dangerous cuts, like what can we do as people who are not politicians? What can we do?
This is such a common refrain, and it's common because it's true, but call your representatives in Congress and demand that they save Medicaid. It's not hyperbole to say that like the threats that are facing Medicaid are existential and we need everyone in the fight. And there's truly no time like the present to call your members of Congress and let them know that you are mad as hell. But also periods when Congress is back at home during recess is a really great time to make your voice heard. We're currently in a recess, but I actually think the Memorial Day recess will be a really important time for representatives to hear from their constituents, because in theory, they'll be sort of like nearing the legislative process. And we know that like Republicans are scared. They've been canceling town halls, but there are organizations on the ground that are doing incredible work to organize demonstrations and events to make it so clear to these representatives that, we are against Medicaid cuts. And we know this works. Like moderate Republicans are terrified of voting for a bill with deep Medicaid cuts. And that's clear from like the way that they have like evolved and how they are talking about this publicly. Like it is true that they voted for the budget resolution, but there's a difference in voting for something that unlocks the legislative process versus actually voting for a bill that contains hundreds of billions of cuts to Medicaid. And I think if we keep up the drumbeat, that we will win.
I always feel like anything that has to do with reproductive health, rights, and justice is always sort of sidelined. And I think strategy-wise, it bums me out, but is it necessary? Because I think the people who are most swayed by the Medicaid cuts are elderly people, are people who have children with disabilities. Like they never think of like, oh, we have to make sure that people are getting really comprehensive reproductive care, because I don't think they give a fuck about us. But I do think they think about my mom or my grandmother who's going to be going into a facility. Do we have to suck it up and focus on where we think we can be most influential to save Medicaid, to be perfectly honest?
You're really speaking my language right now. And I've done like a lot of internal soul searching because I'm always the person in the room who's like, no, say the word abortion. Like it's actually important to say it. And also recognize that there are moments where you do have to pick the argument that is most persuasive to the audience that you were talking to. But I don't even think that that necessarily means that we don't talk about sexual and reproductive health care, because I do think that, like, for example, the Medicaid expansion has become, I think, an increasing target for Republicans. But the Medicaid expansion has been crucial in the fight against the maternal mortality crisis. And it has narrowed maternal health inequities and lowered maternal mortality rates. I think that Medicaid expansion has been such like a part of the American healthcare system that a lot of people sort of forget how revolutionary it is and how important it's been for expanding access to care and improving the state of public health and sexual and reproductive health care access in a way that I think is persuasive. Granted, I'm a very receptive audience for that argument, but
yeah, I know. It just always bums me out because, I mean, we're never going to shut up about focusing on reproductive and sexual health, but I just know that, when you are a family who is dealing with end of life things and where they know Medicaid comes, it's sort of like, where is Medicaid affecting this particular group of people and how would the cuts affect them? I think we have to be nimble in our conversations around that.
And in creating that persuasive conversation, and I feel like you've done a really good job of outlining broad strokes, but like if we were trying to have a one sentence, one hitter for a person who needs persuasion, or even 3 sentences, like what is the kind of thing that a person who may not really be thinking about this would need to hear to activate them and to motivate them? What do you think could be a thing?
That's a really interesting question. And an uninteresting answer is that I do think that like the Medicaid factoid I would pick depends on who the audience is. But like in the sexual and reproductive health care context, I feel like people are always staggered when I tell them that Medicaid is the single largest payer of maternity care in the United States and one of the leading sources of family planning coverage in the United States, because they simply don't think about SRH in the context of Medicaid and how important it is for people of reproductive age to access care.
I think that's important. And I'm also going to toss in that 50% number that you cited earlier, because that's crucial when people think about these things and that they're very successful. We don't say it enough. These programs are successful and they help people thrive. There's not waste. They work. And trying to just take a sledgehammer to things that are working because you feel like you should seems ludicrous.
Yes. And like, not for nothing, Medicaid is popular. There has been recent polling from both sides of the aisle that more than 3/4 of the public supports Medicaid. And you consistently find that folks who have Medicaid, although sometimes they don't actually know that their insurance is Medicaid because they're like in Wisconsin and it's called Badger Care, or they're in California and it's called Medi-Cal. But folks who have Medicaid consistently report like higher satisfaction with their healthcare than a lot of people who have private coverage. And I think that people forget that.
I think that's right. Kat, this has been really enlightening. Hopefully you'll come back and fill us in on when we see how this all shakes out, to see if we have massive victories, if we have some losses, and where we see things heading, because your brain is a really good thing to pick. So thank you so much, Kat, for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks, Kat. Oh my God. You can support and learn all about her Medicaid work and all of our stories that we just talked about in the show notes. And you can find the best, most up-to-the-minute resources on accessing abortion care and funding for your care on our website, aafront.org. Our Charlie chatbot on the bottom right will walk anyone anywhere in the country through their options and resources for abortion.
We do this show because this information is not given enough attention in the media, so help us spread the word and show us some love by liking, subscribing, and giving us a 5-star rating. Every bit helps us reach more listeners.
Yes, it's true. Hey, we're bringing an old one back.
I love this chestnut.
It is a chestnut. It's the party game that's faster than Monopoly, more fun than Taboo. It's 6 Degrees of Abortion. This is the game when Moji takes a story ripped from the headlines, and I have 6 chances to somehow link it to abortion. Let's see if she can stump me. Moj, what do you got?
Well, we will continue with our dragging of the Trump administration. Christy No, this Easter weekend, was at a restaurant with her family, and her Gucci bag got stolen with, I think, $3,000 in American dollars in it, which is wild because isn't she like director of Homeland Security? She can't even secure her Gucci bag.
Well, she also had her passport. I know this story.
Ridiculous. And so I would like you to link Gucci in 6 Degrees or Less to abortion.
Oh my goodness. Let me see. Can I link Gucci?
You can.
Abortion. I feel like I can. I think there was this incredible Gucci uterus situation that I actually begged for somebody. I said, I want this.
Oh, yes, to design. Yes. I
I
remember
want
that.
this. And nobody bought. It was like a $1,700 uterus thing.
So expensive. It was like knit. It was a knit sweater. It was really nice.
Yes, it was part of this collection, I think, with Jason Sudeikis to support reproductive rights. So I'm going to say this Gucci sweater, Gucci did a campaign. I'm doing it. And also fuck Christy Nome.
Always.
Speaking of Vaginal Dryness Awareness Week, Christy Nome had her purse ripped off this week. I hope that somebody bought a bunch of lube with that $3,000. That's what I hope. So I need to know if I won.
Our producers say that it was a dress.
It was a dress.
It was a dress.
Okay, great. So if our producers will put that in the show notes, the picture of the dress or a link to the picture of the dress, it was so cool. Amazing. I'm so glad I won.
It was a good, I had faith. Actually, we were talking and the Jason Sudeikis was the first thing that went in our head, which I'm like, Jason Sudeikis, our body, our choice. That's 2 degrees. We're there. But also it's a fun one.
It is a fun one.
And I got to drag Christy on Vaginal Dryness Awareness Week.
Oh,
I'm celebrating properly.
she should be on the Mount Rushmore of dry vaginas, that bitch. All right. So before we get to our next amazing guest, as you know, we cannot do this show without the incredible support of our sponsors. This week's sponsor, Trapdoor.
Looking for an employer may be daunting. The salary may be right. The job description is perfect. But before you sign on the dotted line, you should know what the work culture is really like.
That's why you need Trapdoor, an app that helps professionals make informed decisions about potential employers. Trapdoor posts confidential information from current and former employees that can give you the insights a job interview can't.
Simply search the name of your potential employer and see if they run a patriarchal paradise or a DEI hellhole. Whether it's important to you that your future boss is willing to drunk post national security plans on Buy Nothing,
or you're a scientist interested in cancer research that only involves cod liver oil and leeches, Trapdoor has a comprehensive database of real-life experiences that can help you say yay or nay to that job offer.
Trapdoor, where your future is bright and your coworkers are alt-right.
Okay, that's helpful. That's a helpful one.
You know, sometimes you need to know that that cod liver is an important cancer research, and it's good to know that your employer supports that.
Or sometimes you want to make sure that your boss is going to take you to a strip club, whether you want to go or not. If that's your jam, that's your jam. You want to make sure that people will say, yeah, it was great. We were dragged there. Some people blacked out.
Boss got drunk and posted next door things.
It was a wild party. For sure. Trapdoor.
Trapdoor. Well, Liz, I am so excited to talk to our next guest. Will you tell our listeners about how fantastic she is?
I would love to. Whether you've seen her live with her band Tigers and Monkeys or fronting ultra baby fat back in the day, or maybe it's seeing her open for David Cross at one of the myriad of comedy clubs in New York City. Our next guest is made of music and comedic magic. She's here to talk about resistance, revolution, and her new album, One Machine at a Time. Please welcome the fantastic, the wonderful Shonali. Hey, Shonali.
Hello, Shonali.
Hi, Liz. Hi, Moji. So nice to be here with you too.
God, so nice to talk to you. New record. Who dis? What is happening? It's so exciting.
You know what? Thank goodness I have music that even I created that I enjoy playing, because I don't know what I would do without it right now. It actually is keeping me going,
Totally. Yes. I mean, I want to get into that with you in a bigger way in a second.
Yeah.
But first, what I want to talk about is the vibes of this record. Tell people about the vibes, because the vibes are fun. It's poppy. It's not my barroom bluesy Shonali that I know. It's a little bit more like awesome poppy Shonali that I now know. So talk about, if somebody was like, what's the record about? Like, talk about the vibes.
There was so much that came out of me that, this is my 9th album. So it actually even surprised me that, and this is what's brilliant about art is you keep discovering yourself. But I feel like it's all the influences that I've had throughout my life and incorporating my favorite things into the Shonali version, which would be like 70s rock, 80s pop, some versions of 90s female like rock. Like I love PJ Harvey, and just saying, you know what? I don't have to be one thing, and incorporating it all. Like there's nothing to lose. I'm just going to be myself. I'm really proud of it. It came on the heels of losing my father, which was also something that, like, I went from pandemic and, world crises, social justice issues in US to like, I need to be quiet and just be an activist, and art, perhaps it's not so important. But when I lost my dad, I just realized like I am an extension of his voice and he is awesome. So let's celebrate that voice.
Yeah.
It happens to also be my voice, but I realized even using my name, Shonali, for me, I've always hidden behind a band name, right? I'm the leader of Tigers and Monkeys. I used to have a band, Ultra Baby Fat. And I was like, my name is resistance, right? Just my name alone, putting it out there and like fronting a band in the United States as a brown woman, it is uncommon, right? It is who I am, but it's also uncommon and it needs to be embraced just like anything else in this country needs. Yeah, that's a whole going into a whole other thing, but it's a fun vibe. There are fun songs. I think there are deep songs about love and loneliness. There are songs that came from this time in my life when I perform these songs live. I talk about the stories behind the songs, which is now what I think is punk rock. When I was younger, I thought it was punk rock to not say the name of the song and just go one after the other and just knock them out, which is what the guys did, right? Now I realize my story is just as important. So, there's a song called The Children Get Old, and it's a song that really was inspired by volunteering at the Covenant House and me being inspired by the kids there that blew my mind. And so this song is a tribute to them. They gave me the gift of just seeing like how courageous and strong and funny and intelligent, resilient they are being kids without homes. So I think the arc is it starts out with like life is hard. And then there's a whole story of, okay, love is important. And then there's let's have fun and dance.
I feel like even if you don't listen to the album in order, I was going through your YouTube and just looking at your videos because you have so many videos from the album, from songs from this album. And one of the things that struck me when I was going through them in quick succession was that you have these descriptions of like vibes of the videos, of vibes of the song, of like maybe inspirations you have, which really felt like, I mean, now everybody streams everything, but when I was a kid, we had CDs or albums and you had these liner notes. And I just thought that was so cool. Like, what were your intentions when you were just like, you know what? I'm going to dump out on my YouTubes. Like, people are probably not going to buy a physical album, but I'm going to make sure that they have my thoughts and feelings accessible to them.
Moji, you just made my day because if one person understands and like reads that, you're the person. Because I've definitely had great feedback, but no one has expressed like seeing the stories that I'm sharing. And you are that person. Thank you.
I'm glad I was that person.
I think, again, just like remembering that my story is important and it connects. Like there's connections that I don't think I'd placed as much importance on the details of the stories before. And I don't know why that is, but definitely coming out of these past 5 years, now 6 years, I am really, really moving forward with like putting it out there and sharing what's behind it all and the great desire to connect and build a community and just keep doing that. And that's what art is, right?
Yeah, it's so funny because I feel like I'm really gravitating towards that combo of performance and conversation all being one. And it was interesting. I just saw Bob Mould here in Minneapolis, and he is the king of exactly what you just said earlier, of just like song, song, song. I want to get as many songs in. It is so punk rock. And he did that. And I was like, I want to know what Bob's doing now. Like I want, you know what I mean? Like the growth of Bob Mould. And he's been through so many trajectories. So
Yep.
I love that offering your growth and your pain and your joy and your everything along with the songs is super cool. And one of the songs on the record that you cover is a world party song that I friggin' love called Private Revolution. And after Moji and I were like listening to your version, we were like, Shonali needs to cover every single one of our favorite protest songs. And we were like, please make that record for us.
I want to hear you do Tracy Chapman's Talking About a Revolution, because I remember being in high school and like playing that whole album, but like that song on repeat.
That is one song that I have definitely thought of doing. I love her so much. You know, she just recently started talking about her music, right? Wow. And just the way she writes songs, and she is definitely one of my inspirations. So I love that. I will say that I just read a story about Gloria Gaynor. I don't know if you all read that, but she just recently like come back. She's in her 80s. Her story, again, mind blowing. She's so relevant today to me from reading her story, but I Will Survive is like a protest song.
100. You know what? Any woman announcing they will live another day
Yes.
is a revolution.
1000%, Liz.
Much to your chagrin, fuckfaces. I will live another day.
And I will dance to it, and I'll still be right fucking here dancing.
Well, that's, you know, disco was revolution.
Yes.
Like people forget how it was a queer revolution, it was a feminist revolution, and it was a Black revolution.
Yes.
And it's forgotten, I think, a lot. I would love to hear you sing Sign of the Times, Prince.
That's a good one.
And then I would also like, because it's a fuck you kind of protest song, Positively 4th Street, only because I want to hear you say, I wish that for just one day you could stand inside my shoes. Then you'd know what a drag it is to see you. I feel like you would sing that so beautifully, because that is one of my favorite 8 lyrics of all time. When you think about like songs that reflect the state of where you're at and the state of revolution, like what are some songs that you're like, I would love to do that, or I might be thinking about doing that?
So I think that I like to turn the idea of these covers like on their head, sort of like, to me, the World Party song. I don't think that everyone's actually understood how many of Carl Wallinger's songs are protest songs. They are songs about existential crises, environmental issues.
Ship of Fools?
Ship of Fools. I love that. And so I have been in this Sly and the Family Stone sort of last 2 years, sort of. I've always been super, super fan, but just really like digesting everything about it, including the band, the voices. It wasn't just his voice, like the inclusivity, like the power of that time and having those people on stage. And so I have been seriously thinking, like, how do I cover one of his songs? And there's so many. But I mean, even like, thank you for letting me be myself. Thank you.
Yeah.
That is huge right now. People aren't allowing people to be themselves.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh
I
my
love
God, that would be so great.
Oh my goodness.
Right? Everyone is a star. Like that song is, I mean, every kid should hear that. Everybody should hear that song. It is a beautiful song. There's 5 voices. It's like all of us are gifted, talented, beautiful human beings existing together. Like, why don't you get that?
Yeah, totally.
Shonali, I love these options. I also am so enjoying talking to you because everything is so overwhelming right now. Like we're told repeatedly that we cannot be ourselves, that people cannot be themselves purely because they're themselves. And I look at the news and I personally fall sometimes into a pit of despair. It's really, really bad. So you told us how through music, but besides music, how are you channeling your rage and how are you keeping your spirits up?
Thank you for that question, because that is a question I ask myself every day. I'm sure you do. Like, how do we do this? And if I think about the title of my album, One Machine at a Time, that came up as a response to being overwhelmed by AI. I was like, oh my God, here we are again with something that's supposed to take over the world in good and negative ways. And it's like literally I have to get through every day, one moment at a time, remind myself I'm not in control of this chaos. It could exist without me knowing it, right? It's 24/7. We just are now diving into it nonstop, you know? So to remind myself to also be good to myself, because I can't take care of everything, but also making sure to take care of myself because we need to have the strength to help each other, right? So there's little things I do. I'm not consistent with meditation, but I do try to take time in the mornings, 5 minutes if I can do it, to just breathe because practicing breathing helps me. I feel like I'm a person that thrives by helping others, but I'm also trying to understand that I can't help everybody all the time. That's another stress level that comes to me. But this is like a moment to moment sort of vibe you just described. That there are moments I was in the park with my sister and my mom in Nashville this past weekend, and we took a walk and we saw 2 owls. And I was just so grateful for just right when the sun was shining. It's like we have to embrace just these moments where we can enjoy the present tense of where we're at because it is overwhelming and it's meant to be overwhelming and it's meant to demoralize us and so it's like we can't give them that power, right? That's the other part I try to remind myself is like they can't have this power over us. We are strong, powerful. We will overcome. We shall overcome. It's like we will. I mean, it's the only way I can survive. If we don't have these windows of like we're going to do this, then what's the point, right?
It's true. And I was going to ask, in the time we're living in where it feels like a luxury to feel safe
Yes.
and to be a brown woman named Shonali,
Yep.
traveling the country, doing shows,
Yep.
how are you managing your own safety so that you can bring joy, have joy, understanding that there's a new layer of reality that Shonali, the American person,
Yep.
is under a microscope?
You're absolutely right. So I came back from doing a show in Canada and I was with everybody in my band. I've known mostly for 20 years, but it's like a lengthy amount of time for each person. And they definitely I knew they would pull over our van and they would go through our stuff. Now going to Canada was super easy. They did a superficial search of the van, but coming back, and I expected it, just honestly, in those moments, I actually felt comfortable, like as being me. It's looking in the room and being overwhelmed by the fact that it was all brown people or Asian people in that room. Say there was 50 of us detained, and like the militarization of like the outfits, just the armor that we have now at the border, which the Canadian border did not have, and the questioning of these families and the way, and I don't know if my Southern accent, like what I think, the only white people that were in that room are 3 of my band members. So, but something happens to me is I'm always looking to like somebody else has it worse than me. And like, I want to be helpful to them. So I'm going to be strong for them. Right. And that is a way I navigate through everything all the time. And I'm actually calling attention to the fact, I mean, I'm going to throw it out there, indie rock needs to like elevate more diverse voices because they exist.
You think? Wait, it's not a melting pot. You mean punk rock's not melting pot? Wait a minute. I have been deceived at all those shows I was at where, oh, wait, no, I'm not.
I'm like, you were at those shows, right?
Yeah, I was part of the non-diversity problem at a punk rock show, for sure.
So this is the first time where in the stories that I'm talking about, I address the fact that, hey, and I even say like this time when I was with Ted, I'd be like, Ted has elevated my voice for a number of years. And like, it means something to me because I know most of you don't see a brown person centered on a rock and roll stage, so I bring it up and the reward, the satisfaction that I get after the show, people coming to talk to me and say, thank you. And like, you gave me something to think about, or thank you for the love. Like I'm also wanting to share love in those rooms. The reward that comes from that's who I am. So all this other stuff that we are navigating now, which is honestly stuff we've had to navigate forever, right? I'm being more vocal about it, right? It's actually empowering me to be more me than I have ever been. So perhaps it's a weird gift in this moment. That is a thing that I think about, that I am being more authentically myself than ever right now. And I'm going to hopefully keep going.
I mean, I think that's right. I feel like any Black and brown person who is in the world, like their album or their book should be called Welcome to the Oppression. Glad you joined us. Glad you could make it. Because it is
Get out of here together.
It is new to one group of people and one group of people only.
Yes. And you both are very familiar with this, but I like to put this out there. I have been much more vocal, outspoken with my progressive white male friends that have believed that they have been part of the solution for so long. And I have been much more vocal about them preaching to the choir and not stepping outside of their bubbles and not seeing the fact that they haven't participated in the activism that the three of us have done, right?
Yep.
I can say that I have affected some change with some people, and that I'm very proud of.
And I love that. And I have to say, shout out just to Ted Leo, because we were just talking. This is the 10th anniversary of Abortion Access Front. And the very first, we did this thing called V to Shining V, where people did concerts around the country to raise awareness about what was happening with reproductive rights. And Ted Leo drove to New Hampshire for free. And we paid his gas in his hotel and gave him some food and did a show for us in New Hampshire. I mean, and
That's
Jason
awesome.
Narducci, Michael Shannon, with their REM tours, they're supporting us and abortion. So,
Yep,
and they thought of it themselves. So I'm like, okay,
that's great.
yes.
That is necessary. That was the other part. It's necessary. They don't care what we say. The three of us, the change, they got to get out in front.
Yes. And it's overdue. It's overdue.
overdue.
I feel like we're doing it now because it needs to be done, but it's overdue.
It's overdue.
It's past time.
Gather your people. I got to gather the white women. The white men got to gather the white men and realize that no one's free till we all are, and they'll have better sex. Just tell them. Look, no one wants to fuck a lazy ass progressive who's got emo vibes. Nobody. Ain't nobody wants that. Like, do it for your own self-interest as well as the greater humanity of all of us.
Perfect way to wrap this interview.
I feel like that's a good wrap. Shonali, where can people find your tour dates? The record, are we calling things records now? I'm old. I don't know.
We're calling them records. They're CDs too. The kids are buying CDs.
Okay.
It's amazing.
Love that.
They're on Bandcamp. My official website is shonaliofficial.com. So it's got everything on there. And you could Google me. I am going by my solo name. That's also a big thing. Shonali. I'm being Cher and Madonna are out there, and now Shonali.
I love it.
Yeah.
Love that.
Also, I think we can sing Shonali. I got it. I got it. So there you go. That's my tribute to you.
Thank you so much.
Shonali, thank you for coming and joining us.
Thank you both for having me, and keep on doing what you're doing. I love you both, and I'm so grateful for you having me here. Thank you.
Oh, always. Thanks, Shonali.
Thank you. Buy her solo album, One Machine at a Time. We especially love the vinyl, if you're into that sort of thing. You can find her on TikTok and IG at Shonali Official. And the links there will send you to where you can buy her albums and all the great stuff you need to know.
That's our show.
That's our show.
Yes. Thank you for listening. And thanks again to Kat Duffy. And be sure to learn more about her Medicaid defense work and how you can support at the link in our show notes.
Did we make you smarter, make you laugh today? Show us some love by liking, subscribing, and giving us a 5-star rating. Plus, stay connected with us on our social media at Abortion Front across all platforms. With your help, we can get more people to learn about this assault on abortion access.
That's right. And are you looking where you might fit in to do some abortion activism? We've got a 5-part training series called Operation Save Abortion at operationsaveabortion.com. And while you're there, you can visit our super cool activist calendar, which is chock full of local and national activities and educational opportunities.
We've also got a great mutual aid program at Abortion Access Front called Adopt a Clinic, where the public can support independent clinics, abortion funds, clinic escort groups, and patients directly by ordering needed items from an org's wish list. This week, we're highlighting Midwest Reproductive Health, a clinic in Rockford, Illinois. They're looking for items to spruce up their space and organize the clinic. Everything from folders to lamps to art can help. Check out their wish list at the link in our show notes. And if you want to get more involved but not quite sure how, you can always sign up to volunteer at our website, aafront.org, and we can figure it out together.
And join us next week. Remember the case of the ghoulish anti-abortion activist who stole 115 fetuses, then passed them out to all their friends like Halloween candy? Well, the DOJ is finally investigating the case and trying to somehow blame Biden for the whole thing. It's a wild story, and journalist Susan Rinkunis is going to bring us the latest.
Plus, comedian, actor, writer, and badass activist Jenny Yang will join us to talk about Bad Asians, her new live comedy and tasting show, as well as her new podcast, What Should We Talk About?
And join our Patreon. You'll support great content and get cool FBK merch and experiences. All pledges support this pod and all of our activism at Abortion Access Front. Pledge at patreon.com/feminist buzzkills. FBK is edited by Remy DeTarnay and is produced by Jin Moon for Abortion Access Front.
And instead of leaving you with a show your whole ass this week, let's go out with the delightful sounds of Shonali. See you next week.
I'm still no threat to you. I fight when there's nothing to lose. They say time will tell, it won't go down. That's the long way to see the sun turn around. Stay up all night, up all night. I can't find you. Let's stay up all night, up all night. Come on, feel my pain. I'm in love with you.
Feminist Buzzkills, the podcast from Abortion Access Front. New episodes drop Friday. When BS is poppin', we pop off. And if you want to support our podcast and all the work of Abortion Access Front, like, subscribe, and join our Patreon at patreon.com/feministbuzzkills.